single dad, John Harper, a broken horse rancher, opens his door to a desperate stranger, never imagining she'd lead him to the son he thought he'd lost forever in a fiery tragedy. 3 years ago. Before we dive into this emotional journey of love, please hit that like button to share their story of hope. Thank you for your support. The wind howled across the plains of Haven, Montana, carrying the sharp bite of an early winter. Dust swirled outside John Harper's farmhouse, rattling the windows and creeping through the cracks of the old wooden door. Inside, the air was heavy with silence, broken only by the creak of the floorboards under John's boots. The single dad, a horse rancher with calloused hands and a heart scarred by loss, sat by the cold hearth, a half-empty whiskey bottle on the table. His dark hair, streaked with gray at 35, fell over eyes that hadn't known peace in years. 3 years ago, his world had crumbled. His wife, Clara, died in a wagon accident. Her laughter snuffed out in a moment. Their son, Samuel, 5 years old with a V-shaped scar on his hand, was presumed dead in a grain barn fire that tore through Haven's outskirts. The sheriff's report, crumpled and worn, still sat in John's drawer. No remains identified. Some nights, John dreamed Samuel had survived, running through fields with a new family, safe. Other nights, the flames haunted him, waking him in a cold sweat. Gasping for air, he poured another glass. The burn of whiskey, a fleeting escape. The townsfolk pitied him, John Harper, the broken man who drank too much, worked too hard, loved too fiercely. His ranch was thriving. Horses sold as far as Billings, but the house felt like a grave. Clara's shawl hung by the door, untouched. Samuel's tiny boots sat by the hearth, gathering dust. Moving them would mean letting go, and John wasn't ready. Not yet. A sharp knock jolted him upright. Who'd come out in this storm? It was near midnight. The clock's hands barely visible in the dim lantern glow. Mr. Harper, you there? The voice was deep. Familiar Reverend Amos Callahan, the town's young pastor who'd buried Clara and held a memorial for Samuel. John rubbed his face, his knuckles bruised from a day wrangling horses, and staggered to the door. Reverend, he muttered. Cracking it open, cold air rushed in. It's late. I know. John, and I'm sorry. Callahan's face, shadowed under his hat, showed worry. Can we come in? There's a matter with him. John's brow furrowed. Behind Callahan stood Deputy Cole, lantern in hand, and a slender figure wrapped in a shawl, shivering against the wind. A woman, her face half hidden, her posture stiff. John opened the door wider, unease curling in his gut. What's this about? Callahan stepped inside, followed by Deputy Cole and the woman. The lantern's light revealed her Abigail Reed, maybe 28, with chestnut hair pinned tight and gray eyes that held a quiet strength. Her dress was travel-worn, her hands clutching a small bag, her lips pale from the cold. Mr. Harper, she said, her voice steady despite her trembling. I'm grateful for your hospitality. Deputy Cole cleared his throat. Miss Reed here got swindled at the station. Came from Chicago for the schoolteacher job. But some thief took her money, her papers, everything. John frowned, leaning against the wall. Sorry to hear it. But why's she here? Callahan hesitated, his hands twisting. Abigail's my cousin's friend from back east. She came on my word the teaching job was open. But it got taken by Miss Larson last week. Taken by Jenny's girl. Cole added, nodding. I was supposed to meet her tomorrow, but she caught the late train. John's jaw tightened. He saw the plea coming, like a storm he couldn't outrun. And you want me to, what? Take her in, just for tonight, Callahan said, his voice earnest. My wife's got kin visiting, and the parsonage is full. Tomorrow, she'll take my sister's room. But tonight, she's got nowhere else. John laughed, bitter and sharp. You want a single woman staying here? With me, you know how Haven talks. Reverend, Cole shifted. Uneasy. It's one night. Harper, unless you'd rather I put her in the jail with drunk Silas. John's head throbbed, the whiskey dulling his patience. Why me? Why not the Millers? They love strays. Millers are in Bozeman. Callahan said softly, Please. John, she's alone. Abigail stepped forward, her chin high despite the chill. Mr. Harper, I don't mean to impose. If there's another way, I'll take it. John looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes held no fear, only a quiet resolve, like someone who'd faced worse than a cold night. Something about her standing there, alone. Defiant stirred a memory. Himself. Outside the doctor's house the night Clara died, with nowhere to belong. He sighed, rubbing his neck. One night, she takes Samuel's old room. You get her tomorrow. First thing. Callahan's face lit up. Thank you. John, I knew your heart was true. Don't call it heart, John growled. Turning away, I know what it's like to be stuck. That's all. The men left to fetch Abigail's bag from the wagon. Leaving John alone in the dim kitchen, he glanced at Samuel's boots, the shawl, the ghosts that filled the house. What was he doing? Letting a stranger in. He moved to the small bedroom, untouched in years, and cleared old blankets from the bed. The faint scent of Clara's lavender soap lingered. Twisting his heart, Samuel's wooden horse, carved by John's own hands, sat on the shelf, its paint chipped but bright. Footsteps returned, and Abigail entered, her bag in hand. Callahan and Cole made quick goodbyes, promising to return at dawn. The door shut, and silence fell, thick and awkward. John gestured to the hallway. Room's that way. It's small, but clean. Thank you, Abigail said, her voice soft but clear. She hesitated, clutching her bag. I've got no money to repay you. The thief took it all. John shook his head, moving to the hearth. Ain't looking for payment. He poked at the dying embers, needing something to do. There's water in the pitcher if you need it. I'll be out here. Abigail paused at the bedroom door, her eyes searching his. Mr. Harper, I know what loss looks like. My brother, he wore that same shadow. Sometimes, the kindest thing is to ask for nothing in return. Before John could answer, she slipped into the room, the door clicking shut. He stood frozen, her words cutting deeper than he expected. Loss. She saw it in him. Plain as day, like Clara used to. He sank into his chair, the whiskey forgotten, and stared at the fire. Who was this woman? And why did her quiet strength unsettle him so? Morning came. The storm quieted to a soft drizzle. The scent of coffee woke John, his neck stiff from dozing in the chair. For a moment, he thought Clara was in the kitchen, humming her old hymns. Then reality hit the creak of floorboards, the rustle of a skirt. Abigail stood at the stove, her hair neatly pinned, her gray dress worn but clean. She turned, catching his stare. Hope you don't mind. I thought coffee might help. John stood, embarrassed in his rumpled shirt. You didn't have to do that. It's the least I could do, she said, pouring a cup. Her fingers, stained faintly with ink, brushed his as she handed it over. The coffee was strong, better than his own. Outside, the ranch whistle blew, signaling the day's work. I gotta get to the horses, he said, avoiding her eyes. Reverend'll be here soon. Abigail nodded, a flicker of worry crossing her face before she hit it. Of course. I tidied a bit, if that's all right. John noticed then the swept floor, the dishes dried by the sink. Clara's shawl folded neatly, small changes. But they made the house feel alive, not just a place to crash between chores. You didn't need to, he muttered, pulling on his coat. I wanted to be useful, she said, her voice steady but tinged with something fear, maybe, of being turned out. John paused at the door. "Miss Reed, if the Reverend's late, you'll be fine here till I'm back." She met his gaze, her chin lifting. "I always manage." "Mr. Harper." At the ranch, John couldn't focus. The horses sensed his distraction, snorting as he fumbled with their reins. His mind kept drifting to Abigail, alone in his house with Clara's things. Samuel's ghost, when his foreman, Nate, barked at him for missing a fence repair. John made up his mind. At midday, he rode to the parsonage, dust trailing behind him. Callahan was in his study, papers scattered. "John, I was about to send for you. There's a hitch." "What kind?" John asked, his gut sinking. The Reverend sighed, polishing his glasses. "My sister's staying another week. Her husband's got business in Helena, and she won't travel alone with the kids. There's no room for Miss Reed." John's hands clenched. "You said one night." "I know," Callahan said, wincing. "I've asked around. But the boarding house is full with railroad men and misses. Larson at the school don't want another teacher in town. She's territorial." John thought of Abigail's careful movements, her quiet dignity. "How long till she finds work?" "Could be spring," Callahan said, grim. "Her papers are gone, and winter's coming. I've sent for replacements from Chicago, but it takes time." The Reverend's eyes lit with an idea John dreaded. "John, you've got space, 2 bedrooms. It ain't proper, not unless—" "Don't say it," John snapped, knowing the word before it came. "Marriage," Callahan said anyway, leaning forward. "She needs a home. You need someone." "Someone," John's voice rose. "What do I need?" "Reverend. A stranger in my house. I ain't replacing Clara." "Not replacing," Callahan said softly. "Living, John. The town worries you're drinking. The fights. Since Clara and Samuel—" "Don't say their names," John cut in, his chest tight. "I ain't marrying some woman I met last night. Just talk to her," Callahan urged. "Miss Reed's practical. This don't need to be love, just an arrangement. For both your sakes." John stormed out, the word marriage echoing like a curse. He didn't return to the ranch. Instead, he walked Haven's dirt streets, remembering Clara's laugh, Samuel's small hand in his. The town had grown new saloons, a proper school, gossip that spread like wildfire. By sundown, half of Haven would know Abigail slept under his roof. The farmhouse glowed when he returned, smoke curling from the chimney. Through the window, he saw Abigail at the table, mending a shirt, his, the one with the torn cuff he'd ignored. Her face was focused, her hands steady in the lamplight. The sight stopped him cold. For 3 years, he'd come home to darkness. Now, there was light, warmth, the promise of another voice. It scared him. How much it mattered. He entered, hanging his coat. Abigail looked up, setting the shirt aside. "I hope you don't mind. I found your mending basket. The Reverend ain't coming," John said, his voice gruff. Her hands stilled, but her face stayed calm. "I see. His sister's staying longer." "No room at the parsonage," he said, leaning against the wall. "Where are you gonna go?" Her spine straightened. "I've got a few coins. Maybe the inn." "Inn won't take a lone woman without papers," John said, sharper than he meant. "Not in Haven." A flicker of fear crossed her face, quickly masked. "Then, the next town." "There's a train tomorrow." "With what money?" John pressed, his frustration spilling over. To beg at strangers' doors. Abigail stood, her composure cracking. "What would you have me do?" "Mr. Harper, sleep in the street. I've lost my family, my home, my work. But I won't beg where I'm not wanted." Her fire surprised him, reminding him of Clara's spirit. He ran a hand through his hair. Softer now, the Reverend suggested an arrangement. Her eyes narrowed. What kind? Marriage, John said. The word heavy. Convenience? You need a place. I need a housekeeper, she asked. Her voice edged with bitterness. Company, he admitted, surprising himself. The town talks. If I had a wife, they'd stop looking at me like I'm half dead. Abigail studied him, her gaze sharp. And love, Mr. Harper. Affection. He looked away, his throat tight. I buried that with Clara. I got none left. Then we're clear, she said, her voice low. I don't want romance either. My family's gone. Security's all I need. He met her eyes, searching for doubt. Instead, he found resolve. You'd marry a rancher you just met. I'd marry for a home and purpose, she corrected. I'd keep your house, cook, keep up appearances. Deal. John hadn't expected such logic. What about kids? He asked, blunt. Her face shadowed. I'm 30, Mr. Harper. I've accepted some things won't happen. Her honesty disarmed him. I drink, he said roughly. More than I should. I ain't much for talk or church. She folded her hands. I don't need talk or sermons. I need a place, and you're offering one. The practicality of it struck him admirable, yet sad. Where was her family? How had she ended up here, alone, before he could ask? A knock came. John opened the door to find Mrs. Ellis, the town's nosiest widow. Her face pinched. Mr. Harper, I hear you've got a guest. Miss Reed needed a place, John said, his temper flaring. She's leaving tomorrow. Mrs. Ellis peered past him, spotting Abigail, unchaperoned. In your house. Really? Mr. Harper. Abigail's voice came, calm and firm. Mrs. Ellis, I presume. Mr. Harper's just proposed marriage. We were discussing it when you arrived. John turned, stunned. Abigail's face was serene, but her eyes dared him to contradict her. She'd made the call, cutting off gossip before it spread. Mrs. Ellis gaped. Marriage. You've just met. Sometimes, Abigail said, stepping beside John. You know, God's path right away. Mrs. Ellis clutched her shawl. Well, I'll pray for you. Her tone said she expected disaster. When she left, John faced Abigail. You didn't have to do that. I did, she said, unflinching. By noon, the town would know I stayed here. My name would be ruined, and yours questioned. This controls the talk. He studied her, this woman who just tied her life to his. You sure about this? She looked around at Clara's shawl, Samuel's boots, the mended shirt. No, Mr. Harper, it's not what we want, but it's what we need. She offered her hand, like sealing a contract. Shall we see the Reverend before Mrs. Ellis spreads her version. John took her hand, feeling the scholar's calluses, so different from Clara's. As they walked to the parsonage in the dusk, he wondered what Clara would think. Was he betraying her or honoring her last words? Live, John. Don't die with me. 6 days later, Haven's church bells rang as Abigail adjusted John's collar in the parsonage parlor. Her fingers moved briskly, avoiding his eyes. There, she said, stepping back. You'll do. John shifted in his old suit, tight across his shoulders. You don't have to go through with this. Abigail's face stayed neutral. It's done. Mr. Harper. Mrs. Ellis told half the town. We could leave, he said, desperate. Start over somewhere and face the same trouble, she countered. No, this is practical. Callahan entered, prayer book in hand, his wife trailing with a small bouquet. A few folks are here, he said, smiling. Word spreads fast in Haven. Of course it did. John imagined the whispers. The widower marrying a stranger. The teacher desperate enough to say yes. The ceremony was quick. The words hollow. When John slipped his mother's ring onto Abigail's finger, her hand shook. Despite her calm, "I pronounce you husband and wife," Callahan said to the small crowd. No cheers, just murmurs. A few women dabbing their eyes. The walk home was silent. Abigail's ring glinting in the fading light. Neighbors nodded. Curious eyes tracking them. "Quite a show," Abigail said softly. "They'll find new gossip soon." John muttered. At the doorstep. He paused. Some old tradition nagging him carrying the bride. Abigail stepped inside, solving it. The farmhouse looked different, floors scrubbed, windows clear. Clara's shawl in a cozy corner. "I made some changes," Abigail said, hesitant. "I needed something to do." "It's your home now," John said. The words strange. Silence fell, heavy with their new reality, married. Yet strangers. "I'll make supper," Abigail said, untying her bonnet. "I'll get wood," John replied, escaping outside. That night, they kept separate rooms, as agreed. John lay awake, hearing Abigail's soft steps, the creak of her bed. What had he done, tying himself to this woman he barely knew? Morning brought routine. John rose before dawn, finding a lunch pail and coffee waiting. A note in Abigail's neat script. "Good morning, Mr. Harper. I hope this suits." The gesture unsettled him, too kind. Too much like Clara, at the ranch. The men ribbed him. "Harper's got a wife." Nate grinned. "Pretty." Two. John ignored them, focusing on the horses. Happiness. He'd buried that with Samuel. This was survival. Nothing more. But when he came home, the farmhouse glowed, the smell of stew welcoming. Abigail sat at the table, grading papers. She looked up, her hair loose. Her face unguarded for a moment, worried, then composed. "Stew, all right?" she asked. Rising. "Fine," John said. "Washing up." "What's that?" "Lesson plans," she said, stacking the papers. "Old habit. Till Mrs. Larson's job opens." Mrs. Callahan said the ranch office might need a clerk for accounts. John raised a brow. "You do that." "I'll do what's needed," she said firmly. "I won't be a burden." "You ain't," he said, but the words felt empty. They ate quietly, the clock ticking. After, Abigail pulled out a worn Bible. "May I read?" "My brother's habit. Every night. Do what you want," John said, shrugging. Her voice filled the room, clear and warm. The verses stirring memories of his mother's readings. He watched her, her face soft in the lamplight, and felt something shift, dangerous, unfamiliar. When she finished, she closed the book. "What happened to your son, Mr. Harper?" The question hit like a blow. "Why?" "His absence, it's everywhere," she said gently. "I should know. The family I've joined." John stared at the fire. The words spilling out Clara's death. Samuel's stay at the town's grain barn. The fire that left nothing but ash. They never found him. He finished, his voice raw. "I searched every town, every farm. Nothing." Abigail's face held no pity, just understanding. How old would he be? 8, John said, his throat tight. He'd be 8. "Thank you for sharing," she said, rising. "It helps." Knowing as she turned, John caught her wrist. "Abigail, why'd you say yes?" The truth. Her eyes met his, unflinching. "Because I know desperation, Mr. Harper. Sometimes the lost save each other." Her words lingered as she left, the fire dying. John sat alone, wondering if they were saving each other or sinking together. The Montana winter crept, wrapping the small town in frost and long socksozatsung, quiet nights. John Harper's farmhouse, once a hollow shell, now carried the faint hum of life. The scent of fresh bread lingered in the kitchen. The floors gleamed under Abigail Reed's careful hands, and the hearth burned steady, chasing away the chill. Yet, the marriage between John, the widowed horse rancher, and Abigail, the stranded teacher from Chicago, remained a fragile thing built on necessity, not trust. John's heart, scarred by the loss of his wife Clara and son Samuel, beat cautiously, while Abigail carried secrets that weighed heavier each day. John woke before dawn, his breath visible in the cold bedroom. The clock read 4:30 a.m. The world outside still dark. He dressed quietly, his boots soft on the floorboards, and paused by Samuel's old room, now Abigail's. The door was shut, but he heard the faint rustle of pages, a sign she was already awake. Reading or writing, her presence in the house was both comfort and chaos, a reminder of what he'd lost and what he couldn't afford to want. In the kitchen, a lunch pail waited on the table, packed with bread, cheese, and an apple. Beside it, a note in Abigail's neat script. Mr. Harper, safe work today. Coffee's warm. John's jaw tightened. Her kindness felt like a debt he couldn't repay, a warmth he didn't deserve. He poured coffee, the steam rising in the lantern's glow, and stepped into the biting cold. The ranch was a mile off, the fields silver with frost, the horses snorting in their stalls. Work was his anchor, something solid in a world that kept shifting. Abigail, meanwhile, filled her days with purpose. By 7, she'd swept the house, baked bread, and walked to Haven's schoolhouse, where she volunteered to help Mrs. Larson with the younger children. The school was a one-room affair, its walls lined with slates, its stove barely keeping the cold at bay. The kids, bundled in scarves, loved Abigail's stories, tales of Chicago's tall buildings and Lake Michigan's endless waves. But Mrs. Larson, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, watched her like a hawk, wary of the new Mrs. Harper, who'd arrived under such odd circumstances. Miss Reed, pardon. Mrs. Harper. Mrs. Larson said one morning. Her voice clipped. You're good with the little ones, but don't get ideas about my job. Abigail's smile stayed polite. I'm just helping. Ma'am, I've no wish to take your place. Mrs. Larson sniffed, unconvinced. Folks talk. You know. A stranger weds John Harper overnight. Seems convenient? Abigail's chest tightened, but she kept her voice steady. God's plans aren't always ours. Mrs. Larson. The older woman's eyes narrowed, but she let it drop. Abigail turned back to the children, her hands trembling as she helped a boy with his letters. The gossip was relentless whispers at the general store, sidelong glances at church. Haven was a town where secrets didn't stay buried, and Abigail's past was a shadow she couldn't outrun. Back at the farmhouse, John returned at dusk, his hands raw from mending fences, his lungs burning from the cold. The house glowed, the smell of stew pulling him inside. Abigail stood at the stove, her hair loose from its pins, her apron dusted with flour. She glanced up, her gray eyes catching the lantern's light. Evening. Mr. Harper, stew's ready. Wash up. John nodded, hanging his coat. Smells good. They ate in near silence, the clocks ticking, filling the gaps. John watched her, noting the ink stains on her fingers. The way she cut her bread into precise squares, she was a puzzle strong. Quiet, but hiding something. He thought of Clara, her easy laugh, and felt a pang. This wasn't love, he reminded himself. This was survival. After supper, Abigail opened her Bible, her nightly ritual. Mind if I read? Go ahead, John said, leaning back, her voice clear and warm, wove through Psalm 23, the words stirring memories of his mother's prayers. He closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him, until she paused. Mr. Harper, may I ask something? Her tone was cautious. He opened his eyes, wary. What? Your son, Samuel. You said he had a scar. On his hand. John's grip tightened on his cup. Yeah, shaped like a V. Caught it on a fence when he was 3, Abigail nodded. Her face thoughtful. I taught at a school near Haven's grain barn. Back then, before Chicago. I remember a boy with a scar like that. John's heart stopped, then raced. He leaned forward, his voice low. What are you saying? She hesitated, her eyes searching his. I'm not sure. There were children at the barn when it burned. Some were taken by families. No records kept. I've been writing to folks, asking about them. John stood, his chair scraping the floor. You knew about Samuel? And didn't tell me. No. Abigail rose, her hands raised. I didn't know it was your son. Not till after we married, when I saw his picture. John's eyes flicked to the small frame on the mantel. Samuel at 4, grinning. His dark hair like John's. You've been looking for him. Behind my back. I didn't mean to hide it. Her voice broke. I was afraid of giving you false hope. I've been writing to farms, churches, anyone who might know. John's chest heaved. Anger and hope warring inside him. Show me. Abigail moved to her room, returning with a bundle of letters tied with string. She spread them on the table, dozens, addressed to places across Montana, Wyoming, even Idaho. I've been searching since the fire. I couldn't save them all. John picked up a letter, his hands shaking. The words blurred inquiry about children from Haven Fire, 1887. Why? He asked, his voice rough. Why do this? Her eyes glistened, but she held his gaze. Because I was there. Mr. Harper, I saw the flames. The children running. I lost my brother in a fire. Years ago. I couldn't let those kids just vanish. John sank back into his chair, the fight draining out of him. Her words cut deep, her grief mirroring his own. You think Samuel's alive? I don't know, she whispered, but I've got leads. A family in Wyoming took in a boy with a V-shaped scar. I'm waiting for their reply. John stared at the letters, his throat tight. Samuel, alive. The hope was a knife, sharp and dangerous. You should have told me. I know, she said, tears spilling over. I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. He looked at her, really looked her pale face, her trembling hands, her eyes raw with guilt. She wasn't Clara, but she was something else. A woman who'd carried her own pain, who'd fought for strangers' children. If you hear anything, he said, his voice low, you tell me. No more secrets, she nodded, wiping her face. I promise. John grabbed his coat, needing air. I'm checking the horses. He stepped into the night, the cold biting his skin. The stars burned bright above, and he thought of Samuel. Out there? Maybe alive. And Abigail, his wife, not by love, but by choice, was the one who'd given him this hope. It scared him. How much that meant. Days passed, the tension between them thick but quieter. John worked longer hours, breaking new colts, his mind on Samuel. Abigail taught at the school, her days full of children's laughter, but her nights were spent writing letters, her pen scratching late into the dark. She kept her promise, showing John every reply, though most were dead ends. No children here matching that description. One afternoon, John's horse threw a shoe, forcing him back early. He found Abigail in the yard, hanging laundry, her shawl slipping off her shoulders. The wind tugged at her hair, and for a moment, she looked at home, like she belonged. He shook the thought off, tying his horse. Need help? She startled. then smiled, a small, real smile. I'm fine, but thank you. He grabbed a basket. Awkward but willing. Any letters? Her smile faded. Not today. But I sent one to a church in Cheyenne. They took in orphans after the fire. John nodded, his chest tight. Keep me posted. They worked in silence. The rhythm of pinning clothes oddly soothing. When they finished, Abigail brushed her hands on her apron. I'm making apple pie tonight. Clara's recipe, from her book. Is that all right? John's throat closed. Clara's cookbook, untouched in years, sat on the shelf. Yeah, he said, his voice rough. She'd like that. That night, the pie's scent filled the house, warm and sweet. John took a bite, the taste flooding him with memories, Clara's laugh, Samuel sneaking crumbs. It's good, he said, meeting Abigail's eyes. Her cheeks flushed. I'm glad. For the first time, they talked, really talked. Abigail shared stories of Chicago, her brother's love for trains, her father's quiet faith. John spoke of the ranch, his first horse, Samuel's obsession with fireflies. The words came slow, but they came. Bridging the gap between them, winter deepened, snow blanketing Haven. Abigail's teaching grew steadier, the children calling her Mrs. Harper with affection. But Mrs. Larson's resentment simmered, her comments sharp. You're settling in mighty quick, she said one day, her eyes cold. Hope you're not planning to stay forever. Abigail kept her composure. I'm here to help, nothing more. At home, John's routine shifted. He drank less, the whiskey bottle gathering dust. Abigail's presence, her quiet humming, her neat stacks of books made the house feel alive. But the letters kept coming, each one a spark of hope or a stab of disappointment. One evening, Abigail handed him a new one, her face pale. From Cheyenne. John's hands shook as he opened it. Dear Mrs. Harper, we have no record of a boy with a V-shaped scar, but suggest contacting the Miller family in Laramie. He crumpled the paper, his jaw tight. Another dead end. We'll keep looking, Abigail said softly, her hand hovering near his. He pulled away. Standing, I need air. He grabbed his coat, the cold night swallowing him. At the barn, he leaned against the stall, his breath ragged. Samuel. Alive, or was this hope just another wound? Christmas neared, Haven's streets strung with lanterns. Abigail helped the school children make paper stars, her laughter blending with theirs. John watched from the door, delivering wood for the stove, and felt a warmth he couldn't name. She caught his eye, smiling, and he nodded, his heart unsteady. That night, Abigail hung a small wreath on the door, her fingers red from the cold. My brother, he loved Christmas, she said, her voice soft. We'd make wreaths like this. John hesitated, then spoke. Samuel, he'd chase snowflakes, try to catch 'em on his tongue. Her eyes softened. He sounds wonderful. He was, John said, his voice breaking. It's. They stood there, the snow falling. The wreath a quiet promise. John wanted to say more, but the words stuck. Abigail touched his arm. Brief but real. We'll find him. John, the use of his name, not Mr. Harper, hit hard. He nodded, turning away. Gotta check the fence. On Christmas Eve, the church glowed with candlelight. The congregation singing Silent Night, John sat beside Abigail, her voice clear and sweet. Samuel's absence ached, but her presence dulled the pain, like a balm on a burn. After, they walked home, snow crunching under their boots. Abigail carried a small gift from a student, a scarf, knitted unevenly but bright. Kids love you, John said, his voice gruff. They're easy to love, she replied, smiling. Haven's growing on me. He looked at her, her face soft in the moonlight. You fit here? Her smile faltered, a shadow crossing her eyes. I hope so. At home, Abigail pulled out her Bible, but John stopped her. Wait, I got something. He retrieved a small box from his room, wrapped in brown paper. It ain't much. She opened it, revealing a silver hairpin. Simple but elegant. John, it's beautiful. Found it in Bozeman, he muttered, embarrassed. Thought it'd suit you. Her eyes glistened as she pinned it in her hair. Thank you. They sat by the fire, the Bible open but unread, the silence warm. John felt it the shift, the possibility of something more. But Abigail's secrets, her search for Samuel, hung between them. A thread that could bind or break. January brought a blizzard, trapping them indoors. John's leg, strained from a fall, kept him home, and Abigail tended him hot compresses, tea, quiet care. Her touch was practical but gentle, her hands steady as she wrapped his knee. You're stubborn, she said, half smiling. Rest, or it'll worsen. He grunted, but obeyed. Watching her move about the house, she read to him Dickens, her voice bringing London's streets to life. They talked more, her stories of Chicago blending with his tales of the ranch. One night, as snow howled outside, John asked, Your brother, what happened? Her face shadowed, but she spoke. Fire in our tenement. He was 12. I couldn't reach him. John's hand found hers, rough but warm. I'm sorry, she squeezed back, tears falling. It's why I search. For Samuel, for the others. I can't let them be lost. He nodded, understanding her drive, her pain. You're stronger than me, she laughed, soft and sad. No, we're both stubborn. The moment passed, but it left a mark. John saw her anew, not just a teacher, a wife by contract, but a woman who'd fought her own ghosts. And he was starting to care too much. Maybe. By February, the snow eased, and John returned to work, limping but stubborn. Abigail's letters kept coming, each one a gamble. One day, she rushed home, her face flushed, a letter in hand. John, from Laramie. He tore it open, his heart pounding. Dear Mrs. Harper, a boy matching your description was with the Thompsons, but left for Casper last year. John's hope flickered, dim but alive. Casper, that's close. We'll write there. Abigail said, her eyes bright. We're getting closer. He looked at her, gratitude mixing with fear. Why do this? For a stranger's kid, her gaze held his, raw and honest. Because I know what it's like to lose family. And because you're not a stranger anymore. The words hit hard, warm and heavy. John wanted to reach for her, to say something real, but fear held him back. Keep me posted, he said, turning away. That night, a knock came late. John opened the door to find Deputy Cole, his face grim. John, there's been a fire at the schoolhouse. Abigail gasped, grabbing her shawl. The children. No one's hurt, Cole said. But it's bad, Mrs. Larson's blaming you, Abigail. Says you left a lamp burning. Abigail's face paled. I didn't. I checked everything. John's jaw clenched. Let's go. At the school, smoke hung thick, the roof half gone. Mrs. Larson stood with the crowd, her voice shrill. She's careless. A city girl. Playing teacher. Abigail faced her, chin high. I doused every lamp. Mrs. Larson. You know I did, the crowd murmured. Eyes on Abigail. John stepped beside her, his voice low but firm. My wife ain't careless. If she says she checked, she checked. Mrs. Larson faltered, but her eyes stayed cold. We'll see what the sheriff says. As they walked home, Abigail's shoulders shook. They They hate me, John. They don't know you, he said, his arm brushing hers. I do. She looked up, tears glinting. Do you? He nodded, his throat tight. Enough to trust you. At home, Abigail sank into a chair, her face buried in her hands. John knelt beside her, awkward but earnest. We'll fix this. Together, she met his eyes, her voice a whisper. Thank you, John. The fire's cause was unclear, but the damage was done. Abigail's place in Haven was shakier, her search for Samuel more urgent, and John, standing by her, felt the weight of their marriage shift. It wasn't just convenience anymore. It was something real, something worth fighting for. But the shadows of their pasts, Clara's ghost, Samuel's absence, Abigail's secrets loomed larger, threatening the fragile home they'd built. The February snow fell soft and steady over Haven, Montana, blanketing the charred remains of the schoolhouse. The fire had left the town shaken, its one-room heart reduced to blackened beams and melted slates. Abigail Harper. Once Abigail Reed stood at the edge of the ruins, her shawl tight against the cold, her gray eyes tracing the wreckage. The accusation from Mrs. Larson that she'd left a lamp burning hung like smoke, tainting her name. Beside her, John Harper, her husband by necessity, scanned the crowd of townsfolk, his jaw tight, his hands buried in his coat. Their marriage, barely 3 months old, teetered under the strain of gossip, secrets, and a fragile hope. The possibility that John's son, Samuel, lost in a fire 3 years ago, might still be alive. John broke the silence, his voice low. This wasn't your fault. Abigail's breath caught, her hands twisting in her shawl. They think it was Mrs. Larson's made sure of that. He turned to her, his dark eyes steady despite the crowd's murmurs. Let him talk. We know the truth. She nodded, but doubt gnawed at her. Haven was small, its judgment swift. She'd come as a stranger, married John overnight, and now stood accused of burning down the school. The townsfolk's stares, some pitying, some cold, felt like weights on her chest. What do we do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John's hand brushed her arm, brief but firm. We rebuild, and we keep looking for Samuel. The mention of Samuel, his son with the V-shaped scar, sent a jolt through her. Abigail's search letters sent to farms, churches, and orphanages across Wyoming and Montana had become their shared lifeline. The latest lead, a boy in Casper, was thin but real. She clung to it, not just for John's, but for herself, to prove she could mend what was broken. Sheriff Mills pushed through the crowd, his mustache dusted with snow. Mrs. Harper, Mr. Harper, a word. John stepped forward, shielding Abigail. What's this about, Sheriff? Mills rubbed his neck, uneasy. Mrs. Larson's filed a complaint. Says Abigail was last to leave the school that night. Wants an inquiry. Abigail's stomach dropped. I checked every lamp. Sheriff, I swear it. Mills raised a hand. I believe you. Ma'am, but folks are riled. Fire's a big loss. We'll look into it. But lay low for now. John's voice hardened. Lay low. She's my wife, not a criminal. I know, Mills said, glancing at the crowd. Just keep the peace. As the sheriff walked off, Abigail felt the town's eyes on her. Mrs. Ellis, the widow with a tongue sharper than a knife, whispered to a neighbor, her gaze cutting. Abigail's cheeks burned, but she lifted her chin. Let's go home, John. He nodded, guiding her through the snow, his hand at her elbow. The walk to the farmhouse was silent, the wind carrying the faint toll of the church bell. Inside, the warmth of the hearth did little to ease the chill in Abigail's heart. She hung her shawl, avoiding John's gaze. They'll never trust me now. John pulled off his boots, his movements sharp, They don't matter. We'll clear your name. How? She asked, her voice breaking. Mrs. Larson's got the town in her pocket. And what if they're right? What if I missed something? He crossed to her, his hands on her shoulders, gentle but firm. You didn't. You're careful. Abigail, I've seen it every dish, every letter, every damn thing you do. This fire wasn't you. Her eyes met his. Searching for doubt, she found none. Only a fierce belief that warmed her more than the fire. Thank you, she whispered, stepping back. I'll make tea. He nodded, letting her go. As she filled the kettle, her mind raced. The fire wasn't just a loss. It was a threat to her place in Haven, to the fragile life she'd built with John and Samuel. If the town turned against her, would they help find him? Or would her search be another mark against her? The next morning, John rode to the ranch. His legs still sore, but his resolve ironclad. The horses needed tending. But his mind was on Abigail. She'd barely slept. Her eyes red when she handed him his lunch pail. Her strength, quiet but unyielding, stirred something in him pride. Maybe, or something deeper he wasn't ready to name. At the ranch, his foreman, Nate, clapped his shoulder. Heard about the school. Tough break for your missus. John grunted, checking a saddle. Wasn't her fault. Nate raised a brow. Folks say she's city, not careful like us. John's hands stilled, his voice low. My wife's more careful than half this town. Say different, and we'll have words. Nate backed off, hands raised. Easy. Harper, just repeating what I hear. John worked through the day, his temper short. By noon, he rode to town, stopping at the general store for news. The owner, Mr. Tate, leaned over the counter. Sheriff's got men poking through the school ruins. Found a broken lamp near the back. John's gut twisted. Abigail checked those lamps. Tate shrugged. Just saying what I heard. Mrs. Larson's pushing hard. Says your wife's a danger. John's fist clenched, but he kept his voice calm. Mrs. Larson's got a grudge. That's all. He left, his mind churning. At home, Abigail was at the table, her letters spread out, her pen scratching furiously. She looked up, her face pale. Any news? He told her about the lamp, watching her flinch. I checked it, John. I know I did. I believe you, he said, sitting across from her. But we need proof. She nodded, her jaw tight. I'll go to the school tomorrow. Look myself. No, he said sharply. Sheriff's handling it. You show up. It'll look like you're hiding something. Her eyes flashed. I'm not hiding. I need to know, and I need you safe. He shot back, his voice rising. This town's looking for someone to blame. Don't give them a target. She stared at him, her breath uneven. I can't just sit here. You will, he said, softer now. For now, we'll figure this out. She looked away, her hands trembling. All right, but the letters? We can't stop. He glanced at the pile, her search for Samuel. Her lifeline. We won't. What's the latest? She pulled out a new one, her voice steadying. From Casper. A preacher there knows a family who took in a boy, about 8. After the fire, no scar mentioned. But it's something. John's heart leapt, then sank. Another lead. Another gamble. Right back. Ask about the scar. She nodded, already reaching for her pen. As she wrote, John watched her focus, her quiet fire. She was fighting for Samuel, for him. Despite the town's scorn, he wanted to thank her, to say what her effort meant, but the words stuck. Instead, he stood. I'll get wood outside. The cold bit his skin, but his mind burned. Abigail wasn't just his wife, she was his partner. whether he'd wanted one or not. And that scared him, because caring meant risking loss again. The next week was a blur of snow and suspicion. The sheriff's inquiry dragged on. The broken lamp raising questions, but no answers. Mrs. Larson rallied her allies, her voice loud at church meetings. "We need a proper teacher," she declared, her eyes on Abigail, someone who knows Haven's ways. Abigail sat in the pew beside John, her hands folded, her face calm, but John felt her tension, the slight tremble in her arm. After the service, "Mrs. Ellis cornered them. "Mrs. Harper, such a shame about the school. You must feel awful." Abigail's smile was tight. "I do, Mrs. Ellis. But I'm helping where I can. Helping." Mrs. Ellis sniffed. "Best leave that to folks who know better." John stepped forward, his voice low. "My wife's done more for this town's kids than most." "Mind your words." Mrs. Ellis flushed, scurrying off. Abigail touched his sleeve. "Thank you, but don't make it worse." "They're wrong about you," he said, his voice rough. "I'm tired of it." Her eyes softened, a warmth breaking through. "I'm used to it." "John, you shouldn't be," he said, guiding her outside. The snow fell thicker now, the town quiet. As they walked, he noticed her limp, her boots, worn thin, soaked through. "Your feet all right?" She shrugged, hiding a wince. "They'll do," he frowned, making a mental note. At home, he pulled a pair of Clara's old boots from a trunk, sturdy, barely used. "Try these." Abigail hesitated, her eyes on the boots. They were hers. "Yeah," he said, his throat tight. She'd want them used. She slipped them on, her fingers tracing the leather. "Thank you, John." The moment felt heavy, like a bridge crossed. Abigail wore Clara's boots, cooked from her recipes, lived in her house. Yet, she wasn't Clara, she was Abigail, with her own strength, her own scars. John felt the shift, the line between past and present blurring. The school inquiry heated up, the sheriff calling a town meeting at the church. Abigail dressed carefully, her hair pinned with John's gift, her face composed. John stood beside her, his hand brushing hers as they entered. The pews were packed, the air thick with tension. Sheriff Mills stood at the front, his voice steady. "We've checked the school." Lamp was broken, but no sign it was lit. Fire likely started from the stove ashes, not cleared proper. Abigail's breath caught, relief flooding her. John squeezed her hand, his eyes on Mrs. Larson, whose face reddened. "So, it wasn't Miss Harper?" a farmer asked. "No evidence says so," Mills replied. "Mrs. Larson, you cleaned the stove last. Care to explain?" Mrs. Larson stood, flustered. I always clean it. Someone must have tampered." The crowd murmured, doubt shifting toward her. Abigail stayed silent, her head high. As the meeting ended, folks approached her, some apologetic. "Sorry for the mix-up." "Mrs. Harper." "Mr. Tate said," tipping his hat. She nodded. Gracious, but guarded. "Thank you." "Mr. Tate." Outside, John pulled her aside. "You're clear. For now," she said, her voice low. "Mrs. Larson won't forget this." "Let her try," he said, his eyes fierce. "She comes for you." "She deals with me." Abigail's smile was small but real. "You're a good man, John." He looked away, his heart unsteady. "Just doing what's right." The school's loss meant classes moved to the church, Abigail helping despite Mrs. Larson's glares. She taught the younger kids, her stories keeping them wrapped. One boy, Timmy, gave her a drawing, a stick figure family, with Mrs. Harper smiling. She tucked it away, her eyes stinging. Haven was hard, but the children made it bearable. At home, The search for Samuel consumed her. Letters piled up, each reply a mix of hope and heartbreak. One night, John found her asleep at the table, her head on her arms, a half-written letter beside her. He draped a blanket over her, his hand lingering on her shoulder. She stirred, blinking up at him. "John, you're working too hard," he said, his voice soft. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "I got a letter from Casper." His heart leapt. "What's it say?" She opened it, her voice trembling. "Dear Mrs. Harper, the boys with the Wilsons. Near Casper, 8 years old. Dark hair, no scar noted. But he came from Haven's fire." Abigail looked up, her eyes wide. It could be him. John's hands shook as he took the letter. "Casper's a day's ride. We'll go," she said, her voice firm. "Tomorrow." He nodded, hope surging. But fear followed. What if it wasn't Samuel? What if it was? "Abigail, thank you." She met his gaze, her eyes soft. "We're in this together, John." The next morning, they packed for Casper, the air crisp with promise. John hitched the wagon, Abigail beside him, her shawl wrapped tight. The ride was quiet, the plains stretching endless under a gray sky. John glanced at her, her face set with determination. "You nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted, her voice low. "If it's not him, or if it is." "Yeah," he said, understanding. "Feels like standing on a cliff." She nodded, her hand brushing his arm. "Whatever happens, we face it." They reached Casper by dusk, the town smaller than Haven, its streets muddy from snowmelt. The Wilsons' farm was a mile out, its lights glowing. John's heart pounded as they knocked. Abigail's hand in his, a quiet anchor. A woman answered, her face kind but wary. "Can I help you?" "I'm John Harper," he said, his voice rough. "This is my wife, Abigail. We're looking for a boy from Haven. 3 years ago, Mrs." Wilson's eyes softened. "You mean Tommy?" "Come in." Inside, the house was warm, the smell of bread filling the air. A boy sat by the fire, dark-haired, about 8, whittling a stick. John's breath caught, his eyes on the boy's hands, no scar. "Tommy," he said, his voice breaking. The boy looked up, his eyes brown, not Samuel's blue. "Yes, sir." Abigail's grip tightened, her voice gentle. "Tommy, do you remember Haven? A fire?" He nodded, slow. "Was little, hot, loud. Folks took me here." John knelt, his heart sinking. "You got a scar, son, on your hand?" Tommy shook his head, showing smooth palms. "No, sear." "Mrs. Wilson spoke, her voice soft. He came with others. After the fire. No name, so we called him Tommy." John stood, his chest tight. "He's not mine." Abigail touched his arm, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson." "Tommy, you're lucky to have this home." Outside, John leaned against the wagon, his breath ragged. Another dead end. Abigail stood beside him, her voice steady. "We'll keep looking, John. He's out there." He turned to her, anger and grief spilling over. "What if he's not? What if he's gone, and I'm chasing ghosts?" Her eyes held his, unflinching. "Then we'll know, but we don't stop till we do." He nodded, her strength pulling him back. You keep me going, Abigail." She smiled, small but real. "You do the same for me." The ride home was long, the silence heavy. At the farmhouse, Abigail made tea, her hands steady despite the ache in her chest. John sat by the fire, staring at Samuel's picture. I thought it'd be him," he said, his voice low. "I know," she said, sitting beside him. "I did too." He looked at her, his eyes raws. Why do you care so much about Samuel? She hesitated, her voice soft. Because I know what it's like to lose someone. My brother, my parents, gone in a night. If I can help you find Samuel, it's like saving a piece of myself. He reached for her hand, his touch warm. You're more than I expected, Abigail. Her heart skipped, but she pulled back, afraid of the warmth. We should sleep. Long day tomorrow. He nodded, letting her go. In her room, Abigail lay awake, John's touch lingering. She was falling for him, not the rancher, but the man who fought for his son, who stood by her against the town. But love was a risk, and her past taught her risks ended in flames. March brought rain, the snow melting into mud. The school stayed in the church, Abigail teaching despite Mrs. Larson's barbs. The town's trust grew. Her name cleared, but the gossip lingered. One day, Reverend Callahan visited, his face serious. Abigail, John, there's talk about your marriage. John's jaw tightened. What kind? Callahan sighed. Folks say it's not real, no affection. Separate rooms, Mrs. Ellis is stirring things up. Abigail's cheeks burned. We're private, Reverend. That's all. I know, he said, gentle. But Haven's old-fashioned. A marriage like yours, it draws eyes. John stood, his voice sharp. They got no right. They don't. Callahan agreed. But show 'em something. A dance, a smile. Give 'em less to chew on. After he left, Abigail faced John, her voice low. He's right. We need to try. Try what? John asked. Wary, being married, she said, her heart racing. Not just in name. His eyes searched hers, a flicker of fear and want. You mean like a real couple? She nodded, her throat tight. For the town, and maybe for us. He stepped closer, his voice low. Abigail, I don't know if I can. Neither do I, she admitted. But we're in this together. Right, he nodded, his hand brushing hers. Together. That night, they sat closer by the fire. Abigail reading, John listening. When she finished, he spoke, his voice hesitant. There's a barn dance Saturday. At the Millers. Want to go? Her heart leapt, surprised. Yes, I'd like that. He smiled, small but real. Good, it's a start. As she lay in bed, Abigail felt the shift, their marriage. Once a contract, was becoming something more. But Samuel's absence, the town's eyes, and her own secrets loomed large. The dance was a chance to show Haven they were united. But it was also a test. Could they build something real? Or would the weight of hope and loss pull them apart? March 1890 brought a restless thaw to Haven, Montana. The snow giving way to mud and the promise of spring. The farmhouse of John and Abigail Harper hummed with a cautious warmth, their marriage born of convenience slowly taking root. The schoolhouse fire was fading into memory. Abigail's name cleared, but the town's whispers lingered, questioning their union. John, the horse rancher, haunted by the loss of his wife, Clara, and son Samuel, felt the weight of those eyes. But Abigail's quiet strength steadied him, her search for Samuel, with leads stretching to Casper and beyond, kept hope alive, a fragile thread binding them. Tonight, the Millers' barn dance loomed a chance to silence the gossip, or to expose the cracks in their fragile bond. The farmhouse glowed under the late afternoon sun, the scent of Abigail's cornbread drifting from the kitchen. John stood in his room, tugging at the collar of his clean shirt, the mirror reflecting a man he barely recognized. His dark hair, streaked with gray, was combed back. His face shaved smooth. The suit, last worn at his wedding to Clara, felt tight across his shoulders. a reminder of a life he'd buried. He glanced at Samuel's wooden horse on the shelf. Its chipped paint a silent ache. Wish you were here. Kid, he muttered, his throat tight. In the kitchen, Abigail pinned her hair, the silver hairpin John had given her catching the light. Her dress, a deep blue she'd mended carefully, hugged her frame, simple but elegant. She smoothed it with ink-stained hands, her heart racing. The dance wasn't just a night out, it was a performance, a chance to show Haven they were a real couple. But the warmth in John's eyes lately, the way his hand lingered on hers, made her wonder, was this for the town or for them? A creak drew her eyes to the doorway. John stood there, his gaze softening as he took her in. You look nice, he said, his voice gruff. Her cheeks warmed. Thank you. You clean up well yourself. He shifted, awkward. Ready, she nodded, grabbing her shawl. Let's do this. The miller's barn was a mile out, the wagon rattling over muddy ruts. Stars blinked above, the air sharp with pine and earth. John kept the reins steady, his silence heavy. Abigail broke it, her voice soft. Nervous, he glanced at her, his jaw tight. Yeah, haven't danced since. Clara, she touched his arm. Brief but warm, we'll figure it out. Together, he nodded, a flicker of a smile breaking through. Together. The barn glowed with lanterns, fiddle music spilling into the night. Horses lined the fence, their breath steaming in the cool air. Inside, the crowd buzzed farmers in their best shirts, women in calico dresses, kids darting underfoot. The scent of cider and hay filled the air, the wooden floor polished for dancing. John and Abigail stepped in, her hand on his arm. And heads turned. Mrs. Ellis, ever the watchdog, whispered to a neighbor, her eyes sharp. Mrs. Larson, still stinging from the school inquiry, stood by the punch bowl, her gaze cold. Reverend Callahan greeted them, his smile warm. John, Abigail, glad you came. Wouldn't miss it, John said, his voice tight. Callahan clapped his shoulder. Show 'em how it's done out there. Abigail's stomach fluttered as John led her to the dance floor. The fiddler struck up a lively reel, couples forming lines. John took her hands, his calloused palms warm, his eyes meeting hers. Been a while, he muttered. Follow my lead, she said, her smile teasing. I taught dance in Chicago. He raised a brow, but stepped with her, clumsy at first. Her laughter, soft and bright, eased him, and soon they moved in sync. Her skirt swirling, his boots tapping the beat. The crowd watched, some smiling, others skeptical. Mrs. Ellis leaned to Mrs. Larson. They look cozy. For now, Mrs. Larson sniffed. Let's see how long it lasts. Abigail caught the whispers, but kept her eyes on John. His focus, the way he held her steady, made the room fade for a moment. It wasn't about Haven, it was just them, moving as one. The song ended, applause rising, and John's hand lingered on her waist. Not bad, she said, breathless. You're a good teacher, he replied. His voice low, something passed between them, warm, unspoken, dangerous. They stepped aside for cider, John's arm brushing hers. Mr. Tate, the storekeeper, approached, his grin wide. Fine dancing. Harper's, you two make a picture. Abigail smiled, polite. Thank you, Mr. Tate, John nodded, but his eyes scanned the room, wary. Mr. Larson approached, her smile brittle. Mrs. Harper, you've got spirit, but dancing won't rebuild the school. Abigail's grip tightened on her cup. I'm helping where I can. Mrs. Larson. John stepped closer, his voice firm. My wife's done more for the kids than most. Let it be, Mrs. Larson's eyes narrowed, but she backed off, her heels clicking. Abigail exhaled, leaning into John. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he said, his eyes fierce. "They're wrong about you." The night wore on, the dances slower, the crowd looser with cider and laughter. John and Abigail danced again, a waltz this time, her hand on his shoulder, his at her waist. She felt his heartbeat, steady under her palm, and her own raced. "John," she started, but the music swelled, swallowing her words. He looked down, his eyes searching. "What?" She shook her head, smiling. "Nothing. Just, I'm glad we're here." "Me too," he said, his voice soft. The song ended, but they stood close, the world narrowing to their shared breath. Outside, the air was crisp, the stars bright. John helped her into the wagon, his hands lingering. The ride home was quiet, the dance's warmth lingering. At the farmhouse, Abigail lit the lantern, her movements slow. "That went well," she said, her voice hesitant. "Yeah," John said, hanging his coat. "Better than I thought." She turned, her eyes meeting his. "John, what are we doing?" He stepped closer, his voice low. "Trying. Like you said." Her heart pounded, fear and want colliding. "And if it's more than that," he paused, his eyes raw. "I don't know, but I'm not running from it." She nodded, stepping back. "Good night." "John, night." "Abigail," he said, his voice thick. In her room, Abigail unpinned her hair, the silver pin heavy in her hand. The dance had changed. Something made their marriage real, not just a shield against gossip, but Samuel's absence, her secrets, and John's grief stood between them, a chasm they'd need to cross. April arrived, the fields greening, the air soft with promise. Abigail's letters kept coming, each one a gamble. One morning, a new one arrived, her hands shaking as she opened it. "Dear Mrs. Harper," a boy, about 8 with a V-shaped scar, was seen in Rock Springs, Wyoming. "Contact the orphanage there." Her breath caught, hope surging. She ran to the ranch, mud splashing her boots, finding John with the horses. "John," she called, waving the letter. Rock Springs, a boy with a scar. He dropped the reins, striding to her. "What's it say?" She read it aloud, her voice trembling. It could be him. His face lit with hope, then shadowed. Could be another miss, like Casper. But it's a scar. "John," she said, her eyes bright. "We have to go." He nodded, his jaw tight. "Tomorrow, I'll get Nate to cover the ranch." They planned the trip, the farmhouse buzzing with nervous energy. That night, Abigail cooked stew, her hands unsteady. John watched her, his heart torn. "Abigail, if it's not him, we'll keep looking," she said, firm, like always. He reached for her hand, his touch warm. You're more than I deserved." Her eyes glistened, but she smiled. "We're even, John." The journey to Rock Springs was long, the train rattling through Wyoming's plains. Abigail sat by the window, her shawl tight, John beside her, his knee brushing hers. They spoke little, the weight of hope heavy. At the orphanage, a stern matron greeted them, her ledger open. "You're here for the boy." "Yes," John said, his voice rough, dark hair. 8, V-shaped scar on his hand. She nodded, leading them to a room where children played. A boy sat alone, whittling, his hair dark, his frame small. John's breath caught, his eyes on the boy's hands. "Son." The boy looked up, his eyes blue, Samuel's blue. He held out his hand, a V-shaped scar clear on his palm. John knelt, his voice breaking. "Samuel." The boy frowned, hesitant. I'm called Daniel now. Abigail's hand found John's shoulder, her voice gentle. Daniel, do you remember Haven? A ranch. Horses. He nodded. Slow. Horses. And a man singing a song about stars. John's eyes filled. The lullaby he'd sung to Samuel flooding back. That was me, son. The boy Samuel stared, his face uncertain. You, my pa? Yeah. John choked, reaching out. Samuel hesitated, then let John pull him close, his small frame trembling. Abigail's tears fell. Her hand on John's back. The matron spoke, her voice soft. He came after a fire. No name. Been here 2 years? John stood, Samuel's hand in his. He's mine. I'm taking him home. Paperwork followed, hours blurring. By dusk, they boarded the train. Samuel between them, clutching a wooden toy. He was quiet, his memories fragmented. But his eyes followed John, curious, wary. Abigail watched them, her heart full and aching. She'd found Samuel. But what now? Was she his mother? Or just the woman who brought him back? Back in Haven, the farmhouse felt new. Samuel's presence, a quiet miracle. He slept in his old room, his boots by the hearth, his wooden horse in his hands. John watched him sleep, his heart torn between joy and fear. Samuel wasn't the boy he'd lost. He was Daniel now, shaped by years apart. Could they rebuild what was broken? Abigail cooked breakfast, her movements careful. Giving Samuel space, he ate slowly, his eyes on her. You, my ma. She froze, her throat tight. I'm Abigail, your pa's wife. I helped find you. He nodded, his face unreadable. John touched his shoulder. She's family, Samuel. The boy looked between them, then back at his plate. Okay. The town buzzed with news of Samuel's return. Folks stopping by with gifts, bread, blankets. A toy train, Mrs. Ellis, for once, was kind. A miracle. Mrs. Harper. You did good. Abigail smiled. Weary. Thank you. Mrs. Ellis. But Mrs. Larson lingered, her eyes sharp, a boy back from the dead. Convenient, with folks doubting your marriage. John's temper flared. Enough! My son's home. Leave it. She left, her silence loud. Abigail touched John's arm. She won't stop. Let her try, he said, his eyes fierce. We've got Samuel. That's what matters. Days passed. Samuel settling in, his laughter rare but real. He followed John to the ranch, wide-eyed at the horses, his small hand in his father's. Abigail taught him letters, her patience endless, but he kept her at arm's length, calling her Abigail, not Ma. It stung, but she understood trust took time. One night, a storm hit, thunder shaking the house. Samuel cried out, his voice piercing. John rushed to him, finding him curled in bed, trembling. Pa, the fire. John held him, his voice soft. You're safe, son. No fire here. Abigail stood in the doorway, her heart aching. Samuel's eyes met hers, scared but seeking. Abigail, stay, she nodded, sitting beside him, her hand on his back. I'm here. Samuel. He leaned into her, his fear easing. John watched, his eyes soft. Thank you, he mouthed. As Samuel slept, Abigail met John's gaze. He's healing, she whispered. Because of you, he said, his voice raw. You brought him back. She shook her head, tears falling. We did. He reached for her, his hand cupping her face. Abigail, The words hung, unspoken. She leaned into his touch, her heart open but scared. John, we have time. He nodded, pulling back. Yeah, we do. April's end brought a town meeting. plans to rebuild the school. Abigail offered to help, her voice steady despite Mrs. Larson's glares. The townsfolk listened, some nodding, others hesitant. John stood beside her, his presence a shield. "My wife's got ideas," he said, his voice firm. "Hear her out." She spoke of desks, books, a stove that wouldn't spark. The crowd warmed, clapping when she finished. Mrs. Larson stayed silent, her defeat clear. After, Reverend Callahan pulled them aside. "You're a team now." Haven sees it. Abigail smiled, weary but proud. "We're trying." "Reverend." At home, Samuel drew by the fire, his picture a ranch with 3 figures: John, Abigail, himself. Abigail's heart swelled, her eyes meeting John's. "He's ours?" she whispered. "Yeah," John said, his voice thick. "Ours." That night, they sat close. Samuel asleep, the fire crackling. John took her hand, his thumb tracing her ring. "Abigail, I'm falling for you." Her breath caught, joy and fear colliding. "John, I'm scared." "Me too," he said, his eyes steady. "But I want this." "Us," she nodded, tears falling. "So do I." They leaned close, their foreheads touching. The world quiet. Samuel's return had mended them. But their love new, fragile was their own. Haven's whispers, Mrs. Larson's schemes, the ghosts of Clara and Abigail's past loomed. But for now, they had each other. The dance had been a step. This was a leap, and they'd take it together into the unknown. The spring bloomed across Haven, Montana, painting the plains with wildflowers and softening the mud underfoot. John Harper's farmhouse, once a tomb of grief, now echoed with life. Samuel's laughter, Abigail's soft humming, the creak of John's boots on the porch. Their marriage, born of necessity, had grown into something real, rooted in shared hope and quiet love. Samuel, the 8-year-old boy with the V-shaped scar, was home. His return a miracle that silenced much of Haven's gossip. But shadows lingered: Mrs. Larson's resentment, Abigail's unspoken past, and the fragile trust between a family pieced together from loss. As summer neared, John and Abigail faced their final test. To build a home not just for Haven's eyes, but for their hearts. Morning sunlight spilled through the kitchen, catching the steam from Abigail's coffee. She stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, her blue dress dusted with flour. Samuel sat at the table, his dark hair tousled, sketching a horse with a stubby pencil. John entered, his shirt rolled to his elbows, fresh from feeding the horses. "Smells good," he said, his voice warm. Abigail smiled, sliding a plate toward him. "Hope it tastes as good." Samuel looked up, grinning. "Pa, can I ride Daisy today?" John ruffled his hair, his heart full. "If you finish your chores." "Yeah," Samuel nodded, diving back into his drawing. Abigail watched them, her chest tight with joy and fear. Samuel called her Abigail, not Ma, but his trust was growing small moments. Like when he'd clung to her during the storm. She wanted to be his mother, but feared pushing too hard. Her own past, a family lost to fire. A brother's face fading in memory made her cautious, afraid to love too deeply. John caught her gaze, his eyes soft. "You all right?" She nodded, forcing a smile. "Just thinking." He reached for her hand under the table, his thumb brushing her ring. "We're doing good." Abigail, her heart steadied, his touch an anchor. "Yeah, we are." After breakfast, John headed to the ranch, Samuel trailing him to help with the horses. Abigail walked to the church, where the school now operated, her satchel heavy with books. The new schoolhouse was rising nearby, its frame stark against the sky. Funded by town donations and John's own labor, she taught the younger children, her stories of far-off places earning their wide-eyed awe. But Mrs. Larson's presence loomed, her sharp eyes tracking Abigail's every move. "Mrs. Harper." "Mrs." Larson said after class. Her voice clipped. "You're popular with the children, but don't forget your place." Abigail's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed calm. "My place is helping Mrs. Larson." Nothing more. The older woman's smile was thin. "We'll see." Abigail left, her boots crunching on gravel. "Mrs. Larson's words a splinter in her mind. Haven had warmed to her Samuel's return, her work at the school. Her quiet bond with John had won many over. But Mrs. Larson, stung by the school fire inquiry, nursed a grudge, her influence subtle but sharp. Abigail feared what she might do, especially now, when her family felt so fragile. At the ranch, John worked with a new colt, his hands steady but his mind on Abigail, her strength writing letters to find Samuel. Facing the town's scorn had pulled him from the darkness of Clara's death. He loved her, not with the fierce fire of his youth, but with a deep, steady flame. Yet, he sensed her holding back, a shadow in her eyes when she looked at Samuel or spoke of family. He wanted her to trust him, to share whatever haunted her, but feared pushing too soon. Samuel tugged his sleeve, breaking his thoughts. "Pah. Look, Daisy's ready." John smiled, lifting him onto the mare's back. "Easy now. Hold the reins tight." Samuel beamed, his blue eyes, Clara's eyes bright with pride. John walked beside him, his heart aching with love and guilt. Samuel was home, but different, quieter, shaped by years in orphanages, his memories of Haven faint. John wanted to give him everything, to make up for the lost time, but knew it would take patience. And Abigail, she was the bridge. Her gentle care helping Samuel heal. "Pop," Samuel said, his voice small. "Is Abigail my ma now?" John's breath caught, his hand on the reins. "She's your family. Son, loves you like a ma would." Samuel nodded, his face thoughtful. "She's nice, reads me stories." "Yeah," John said, his throat tight. "She's special." They finished the ride, Samuel chattering about horses, and John felt a spark of hope. Samuel was opening up, not just to him, but to Abigail. Maybe, just maybe, they could be a real family. That afternoon, a letter arrived, its postmark from Chicago. Abigail's hands shook as she opened it. Alone in the kitchen, the handwriting was unfamiliar, the words sharp. "Miss Reed, I've heard you're in Montana. Married now. Your father's debts remain unpaid. His creditors seek you. Reply, or they'll find you." Her heart raced. The past she'd fled rushing back. Her father, a failed merchant, had died in the Chicago fire with her brother, leaving debts she couldn't pay. She'd changed her name, moved west, hoping to escape. But now, the past had found her. She burned the letter in the hearth, her hands trembling. Tell John. He'd stand by her. She knew, but the shame, the fear of dragging him and Samuel into her mess, kept her silent. She'd handle it alone, as always. But the weight of the secret grew, a crack in the life she'd built. John returned at dusk, Samuel trailing him. Both muddy and grinning, caught him trying to race Daisy. John said, his eyes warm. Abigail forced a laugh. "Setting out supper. Sounds like trouble." Samuel giggled, climbing into his chair. "Pa says I'm fast." "You are," she said, ruffling his hair. His smile eased her fear. But the letter's words lingered, a shadow she couldn't shake. They ate, the conversation light horses, the school, the upcoming town fair. After, Samuel drew while Abigail read from her Bible, her voice steady despite her racing heart. John watched her, sensing something off. "You quiet tonight," he said, his voice low. She closed the book, her smile tight. "Just tired." He nodded, but his eyes lingered, searching. "Get some rest." Then, in bed, Abigail lay awake, the letter's threat echoing, She'd protect John and Samuel, whatever it took. But how? The creditors could come, could ruin everything. Sleep came fitfully, her dreams filled with fire and loss. The town fair arrived in May, Haven streets alive with stalls, music, and laughter. John, Abigail, and Samuel walked together, Samuel clutching a penny for candy. The air smelled of popcorn and hay, the sun warm on their faces. Abigail wore her blue dress, the silver hairpin glinting, her arm brushing John's. He carried a basket of her baked goods for the sale, his free hand ruffling Samuel's hair. "Pa, can I try the ring toss?" Samuel asked. His eyes wide, John handed him a coin. "Go on, win something for Abigail." Samuel ran off, leaving them alone. Abigail smiled, her heart lighter. "He's happy today." "Yeah," John said, his voice soft. "Thanks to you." She looked up, his gaze warm, unguarded. "We're a team, John." He nodded, his hand finding hers, their fingers lacing. More than that. "I hope." Her breath caught, love and fear colliding. "Me too." They wandered the fair, cheering Samuel's win, a small wooden bird he gave to Abigail. His face shy. "For you," he said. Her eyes stung as she tucked it in her pocket. "So, thank you, Samuel." Mrs. Ellis approached, her smile forced. "What a sweet family." Haven's talking. "Mrs. Harper, you've settled in." Abigail's grip on John's hand tightened. "We're grateful for Haven," she said, her voice calm. "Mrs. Ellis nodded, moving on, but her words left a chill. The town watched, always watched. At the dance tent, John pulled Abigail onto the floor, his arm around her waist. The fiddle played a slow tune, their steps easy, practiced from the miller's barn. She leaned into him, her cheek near his. "The world fading. Abigail," he murmured, "I love you." Her heart stopped, joy flooding her. "John, I love you too." They danced. Their confession, a quiet vow, but her secret the letter. The debts gnawed at her. She'd tell him. Soon, but not tonight. Not with Samuel's laughter ringing. Not with John's arms around her. June brought heat. The schoolhouse nearly complete. Abigail helped paint its walls. Samuel beside her, his small hands smudged with white. John hammered beams, his shirt damp with sweat, his eyes meeting hers across the room. The town worked together. Mrs. Larson's influence waning as Abigail's grew. But a new threat arrived, a man in a black suit, stepping off the train, asking for Abigail Reed. He found her at the general store, his voice smooth, his eyes cold. "Miss Reed, I'm Mr. Carver, representing your father's creditors. You owe $500. Abigail's blood ran cold, her basket trembling. I'm Abigail Harper now. My father's debts aren't mine." Carver's smile was thin. "The law disagrees. Pay, or we'll seize your husband's land." She paled, her voice low. I need time, 1 month," he said, tipping his hat. "I'll be back." She stumbled home, her mind racing. Tell John. He'd fight for her, but the ranch, his life. Samuel's future was at risk. She couldn't let that happen. That night, she wrote to Chicago, begging for leniency, her pen shaking. John noticed her distraction, his voice gentle. "Something's eating you, Abigail." She forced a smile, her heart breaking. "Just the school. It's a lot." He nodded, but doubt lingered in his eyes. "You'd tell me, right?" "Anything," she nodded. Hating the lie, of course. The schoolhouse opened in July, its bell ringing clear. Abigail taught alongside Mrs. Larson. Their truce uneasy but functional. Samuel joined the class. His letters neat, his smile bright. But Abigail's fear grew. Carver's deadline loomed. Her letter unanswered. She worked extra hours, sewing for neighbors, saving every cent. But it wasn't enough. One evening, Samuel fell ill fever, chills, his small body shaking. Abigail stayed by him, her cool cloth on his brow, her voice soft with stories. John paced, his face pale. He'll be fine. Right, she nodded, hiding her own panic. The doctor's coming. Dr. Hayes arrived, his bag heavy. Just a cold, he said, leaving medicine. Keep him warm. Abigail held Samuel, his head on her chest, his voice weak. Abigail, don't leave. I'm here, she whispered, tears falling. Always. John watched, his heart torn. She was Samuel's mother in every way but name. Her love fierce, selfless. He loved her more for it, but her secrecy, her shadowed eyes, her quiet moments worried him. What was she hiding? Samuel recovered, his laughter returning. But Abigail's strain grew. Carver sent another note. 2 weeks. She burned it, her resolve hardening. She'd sell her mother's necklace, her last treasure, if it came to that. But Haven had other plans. August brought a storm. The sky black, the wind howling. The church held a fundraiser for the school, a supper under lanterns. The townsfolk gathered. Abigail served pie, her smile bright for the crowd. But John saw the tension in her hands. Samuel sat with friends, his bird toy in his pocket, his eyes on her. Mrs. Larson stood, her voice loud. We've rebuilt, thanks to Haven's heart. But we must guard our town from outsiders. The crowd shifted. Eyes on Abigail. John stood, his voice cutting through. My wife's no outsider. She found my son, taught our kids, built this school with us. She's Haven. Murmurs rose, some agreeing. Abigail touched his arm, her eyes grateful. Thank you, John. Before Mrs. Larson could reply, a man stepped forward, Mr. Carver, his suit stark in the lantern light. Mrs. Harper, a word. Abigail froze, her face paling. John stepped beside her. Who are you? Carver's voice was cold. A creditor. Your wife owes $500. Mr. Harper, her father's debts. Pay, or lose your ranch. The crowd gasped. Mrs. Ellis's eyes gleaming. Abigail's voice shook. John, I was going to tell you. He faced her, hurt flashing, but his voice stayed firm. Why didn't you? She blinked back tears. I didn't want to lose you, Samuel. He turned to Carver, his jaw tight. How much? Exact. $500, Carver repeated. By tomorrow, John nodded, his mind racing. The ranch was theirs, but cash was scarce. He'd sell horses, land, anything. You'll get it. Abigail grabbed his arm. John, no. The ranch is ours. He cut in, his eyes fierce. You're my wife. We face this together. The crowd watched, silent. Reverend Callahan stood, his voice calm. Haven, this is family. Who'll help? Hands rose, coins and bills piling up. $50 from Mr. Tate, $20 from the Millers, even $10 from Mrs. Ellis, her face red. Abigail's tears fell, her voice breaking. Thank you, all of you. By midnight, they had $450. John pulled Abigail aside, his voice low. I'll sell the colt tomorrow. We'll make it. She shook her head, sobbing. I'm so sorry. John, I should have told you. He cupped her face, his eyes steady. You were scared. I get it. But no more secrets, Abigail. We're family. She nodded, leaning into him. No more secrets. Morning came, Carver waiting at the store. John handed him $500. The colt sold. The town's gift in his pocket. We're done, he said, his voice hard. Carver nodded. Leaving? Abigail stood beside John, her hand in his. I don't deserve this. You do, he said, pulling her close. You're my home. Abigail. They returned to the farmhouse, Samuel running to them, his eyes bright. Abigail, you okay? She knelt, hugging him. We're perfect. Samuel. He hesitated, then whispered, Can I call you Ma? Her heart broke open, joy flooding her. Yes. Samuel. Yes. He hugged her tight, John's arms around them both. The farmhouse glowed, the hearth warm. Their ghosts at peace, Haven's whispers faded. The town theirs, their family whole. Clara's shawl hung by the door, a blessing, not a weight. Abigail's past, John's grief. Samuel's scars, they were part of them, forged in fire, but stronger now. That night, they sat on the porch, Samuel asleep, the crickets singing. John held Abigail's hand, her ring glinting. We made it, she whispered. Yeah, he said, kissing her temple, and we'll keep going. Together, she smiled, her heart full, always. The stars burned bright above, and Haven slept. Their home a beacon of love, hard-won and unbreakable. The fire had taken much, but they'd built something new. A family, a life, a love that would endure. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey on the Kindness in Real Life channel. Your support has warmed our hearts, and we're so grateful you shared in their story of love and family. If this tale touched you, please drop a comment with your favorite moment, and subscribe to keep the kindness alive. Let's spread hope together. See you in the next story.